Curious about a case that could wreck your workplace? Lucky for you, we have a lawyer on the clock.
So, Phil, unless you have been living under a rock these days, everybody out
Someday
there,
I'd like to live under a rock for a while, Bert.
I'm envisioning something either from the Flintstones or SpongeBob. I don't know. Maybe he lives under the sea and under a rock, or that's Patrick, I think. But in any event, unless you've been living under a rock, everybody is aware of the Trump administration's really quite unprecedented firings of agency board members across.
What, is he making changes? Has he made changes?
Just a couple.
Okay.
Across the U.S. government. And, he's losing a lot of these cases at the district court level and which would be the trial court level. Some of these cases have gone up on appeal. He's been a little bit more successful at the appellate court level. But ultimately, I think that these agency board member cases are going to end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. And I just want to point out that the Supreme Court in prior cases, this current court has definitely indicated that they're receptive to the administration's assertions of authority to have this broad view of presidential immunity and presidential removal powers. And I think that that he's ultimately, by reading the tea leaves here, he's ultimately going to prevail on a lot of this. And there's a statutory shield against at-will dismissals for independent agency panel members that Congress first created back in 1887. Phil, that's even before you were born, I think.
Wow. Wow. That was before AIM was founded,
Yeah, well, that's a good point. AIM goes back to what, the early 1900s?
1889 or 1898. Wow.
Okay.
What was it, Tim? In 98 or 89, I should know. But anyway, so 125 years ago, 26 years ago.
So this doctrine has existed for a long time, and I think that the power to fire non-compliant officials, the focus on that is what it really boils down to. And I think that that these Supreme Court justices, I'm not going to get into all of the cases that it involves out there. There's a trilogy or 3 cases out there, but I think that ultimately Trump is probably going to prevail on the executive branch's ability to terminate these employees. And so just keep that one on the radar. Now I'm going to quickly move into something else. President Trump did get his Secretary of Labor pick confirmed on Monday of this week. The Senate confirmed Lori Chavez-DeRemer as his labor secretary. Interestingly, she will oversee the Department of Labor, and some of the things, as we all know, that the Department of Labor does is that they report the U.S. unemployment rate, they regulate workplace health and safety standards, investigate minimum wage, child labor, and overtime pay disputes, and apply certain laws on union organizing and unlawful terminations. But they're really focused on the primarily OSHA and the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Department of Labor had nearly 16,000 full-time employees last year and had a budget of $13.9 billion for fiscal year 2025. A lot of prominent labor unions, including the Teamsters, endorsed Chavez-DeRemer. She's a former congresswoman, Republican congresswoman from Oregon. She's the daughter of a Teamster. And during her one term in the House, she actually had endorsed the idea of the PRO Act, which we've talked about on the program a lot, which is the union's wish list of everything they wish they could get in as it applies to the National Labor Relations Act and union organizing process. So she's been confirmed now. There's only one Trump cabinet official, despite all the theater that we've seen out there from the opposition over the last couple of months. There's only one pick out there, and that's Elise Stefanik. She's been nominated as the lead representative from the United States to the United Nations. And so that is Trump's only pick that's out there. I also want to mention not only Chavez-DeRemer on Monday, but yesterday, the Senate confirmed Keith Sonderling to serve as the Deputy Secretary of Labor. So that does round out the top leadership at the Secretary of at the Department of Labor. Sonderling will oversee the agency's workforce and day-to-day operations, which is obviously undergoing a large-scale transition and reduction effort driven by DOGE. And interestingly, Sonderling, he's a former Republican commissioner from the EEOC. So now he's moving from the EEOC over to the Department of Labor. He has been serving as a senior advisor at the Department of Labor since Trump took office in January. Okay. All right, so that's a lot going on at the federal level. One more at the federal level, just to put it on everyone's radar. Our own Senator Josh Hawley, who is a Republican senator from Missouri, has backed, is actually supporting and helping to sponsor a union-backed bill that he describes as adding a short clock to bargaining obligations for initial labor contracts. And so he actually introduced the Faster Labor Contracts Act last week. The first formal piece of a series of proposed changes to federal labor law that he has been floating in Congress. And so I think what this really indicates is he's making a concerted outreach to labor, which may indicate that he has aspirations for higher roles within the federal government. Not saying that he's going to make a run for president or try to be on a ticket.
Not going that far yet, huh?
Yeah, not that far yet, but it would indicate that with the labor outreach that he is listening to his constituents here in Missouri and also maybe trying to posture himself for additional roles.
Well, he does have a lot of labor in Missouri. I mean, most of, Missouri is anchored with a couple large metropolitan areas, St. Louis, Kansas City, and most of our metropolitan areas around the country have that. And, what I think I'm picking up on here, Bert, and I saw it during the national convention, the Republican National Convention, when the Teamsters Union president spoke for the first time in I don't know how long at the National Republican Convention. I'm seeing a shift starting to occur, and I wouldn't go as far as saying that a pro-labor. I'm just seeing it as pro-jobs, right? And to do that, you have to bring the labor movement, or the labor side of things, union side of things, along with you. You just can't fight it the whole way. And I'm starting to see maybe some wisdom in that, some clarity coming together. Maybe instead of both sides being adversarial, maybe being a little bit more collaborative. I don't know what your take. You work in this field better than I do, but it's more about pro-America, pro-jobs that I think I'm starting to see versus, no, if you're a union, I'm against you, period. And it's more both sides want work to be done in America.
Yeah, I think there's some unions have started to get it and are seeking to be a little bit more collaborative. Some companies have started to get it. They're seeking to be a little bit more collaborative. I don't think that translates overly broadly at this point. The statistics came out for unionization in the United States in 2024. And once again, that number ticked down, I think for the first time ever, to under 6%. 5.9% of the United States private sector workforce belongs to a union. And you contrast that from 50 years ago when that number was about 24%. It just shows that unions are having a harder and harder time continuing to try to organize employers. And the Teamsters, I think, have recognized that, and they're trying a different approach. There's a lot of other unions that are still trying the same old thing, and I think they're going to continue to get the same old results.
And I just feel like there's this really thin line, and I think it's a very, very thin line between unions and labor. I don't see them as exactly the same thing. Sometimes we use labor and we use unions, and we mean the same thing when we use those two words. But there's a lot of people who work labor-related oriented jobs who are not part of union, right?
Yes.
basically 96% of the country would say, no, I'm part of the labor force in one way.
Well, 94. 94.
94.
I don't want to correct your math.
Yeah, well, we're trending anyway. But many people say I'm part of the labor force, but I'm not part of a union organization. And if we can get that to come together some, I think and politics won't be so divided on that particular word, unions or labor. Anyway,
and Phil, I just want to make it really clear. I'm talking about 5.9% of the private sector workforce.
Private sector, yeah.
Yeah, when you include governmental, public employees, a little over 10% of the United States workforce belongs to a union. But in the private sector, that number is down to 5.9%. And even when including that public sector, that's down to an all-time low as well.
Thanks for being an on-demand viewer of This Week at Work. Don't forget, you can be part of the show by watching live at 7:30 a.m. Central every Thursday morning, when you can get your burning questions answered by using the question mark icon to the right of the player. In fact, you can ask a question now. Head over to aimea.org. Under Member Resources, you'll find This Week at Work. Click Listen Live to register for our next episode and submit a question. Or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. We'll see you next week when we discuss what's happening this week at work.